For years, seasoned explorer James Falcon Mercer had chased the legends of the deadly Serpent's throat, a labyrinth said to swallow anyone who dared to enter. After years of searching, he finally found it, a hidden chamber etched with ancient symbols, untouched for centuries. As his light flickered across the stone walls, a low rumble echoed through the darkness. Falcon discovered what he came for, but it was too late to turn back. Silence hung over the ancient hills of Valle Oscuro as James Falcon Mercer studied the treacherous terrain through military-grade binoculars. 20 years of special forces operations had taught him to read landscapes like others read books, and this one screamed danger from every shadow and crevice. The locals called it the Serpent's Throat, a cave system that had swallowed 12 expeditions in the past century. Alone, none had returned intact. Some hadn't returned at all. 3 clicks to the village west-northwest, he muttered, muscle memory from thousands of mission briefings still dictating how he processed information. His weathered hands adjusted the focus. Scars from Baghdad, Kandahar, and a dozen classified locations catching the morning light. At 45, Falcon carried his combat experience in every movement, economical, precise, deliberate. The Land Rover's suspension groaned as it navigated the final stretch of unmapped road. Dr. Raymond Chun, the expedition's lead archaeologist, clutched his laptop protectively as they bounced through another pothole. "You really think it's down there, the Chamber of Echoes?" Chun asked, his academic skepticism evident in every word. Falcon didn't answer immediately. 8 years of archaeological expeditions after his military retirement had taught him patience. Professor Harlow thought so, and he was rarely wrong. The mention of his former mentor, whose last transmission had come from these very hills before disappearing 3 years ago, hung in the air like smoke after an artillery strike. The village of San Miguel appeared through the morning haze, a collection of weather-beaten structures that had withstood 5 centuries of existence. Falcon scanned for movement patterns, unconsciously mapping approach routes, defensive positions, and extraction paths. Old habits. Their vehicle halted in the village square where Elena Vasquez waited, her posture marking her instantly as there. Local guide. Falcon recognized the quiet alertness of someone who knew the land intimately, the same alertness he'd seen in tribal guides in the Hindu Kush. "Mr. Mercer," she nodded formally, extending a hand calloused from years of climbing. "You're the first expedition since Professor Harlow to bring proper equipment." "Falcon," he corrected, assessing her with the practiced eye of someone who'd led countless teams into hostile territory. And adequate preparation is the difference between coming back with discoveries or not coming back at all. The village elder approached, his face a roadmap of deep wrinkles and deeper wisdom. "The caves have claimed many," he said in Spanish-accented English. "Even your professor. The Serpent does not surrender its secrets easily." Falcon met the old man's gaze, the weight of his former mentor's disappearance evident in his controlled expression. "With respect, neither do I." The expedition team assembled at the village's only inn, an eclectic collection of specialists Falcon had personally selected. Dr. Wei Lin, geologist with experience mapping unstable cave systems in Vietnam. Michael Torres, communications expert, who'd served with Falcon in Syria. Dr. Sarah Blackwood, anthropologist specializing in pre-Columbian civilizations. And 2 graduate students, both with rock climbing experience, both unaware of the true dangers that awaited them. "Gear check at 0500, Falcon instructed, falling into the command tone that had guided soldiers through the world's deadliest combat zones. "Full inventory verification. Nothing enters the cave system without triple redundancy." His gaze swept. "The team, the Serpent's Throat, has claimed 13 expeditions. We won't be number 14. Later, as night descended over San Miguel, Falcon stood at the edge of the village, studying the dark mountains where the cave entrance waited. His satellite phone showed no signal, as expected in such remote terrain. In his hand he held Professor Harlow's final message, coordinates to what the old archaeologist had called the discovery of the millennium. "What did you find down there, Professor?" Falcon whispered to the darkness. From behind him, Elena approached, her footsteps deliberately audible. She understood military men and their startle reflexes. "The villagers say the caves breathe," she said, stopping beside him. "They say before the Serpent takes someone, they hear whispers from the deep." Falcon's expression remained neutral, but his eyes narrowed slightly. In Afghanistan, locals had spoken of mountain passages that whispered to travelers before avalanches struck. Such stories often contained kernels of truth wrapped in superstition. "Tomorrow we find out," he replied, checking his custom-designed watch, altimeter, barometer, and GPS tracking built into a virtually indestructible frame. What neither of them noticed was the slight tremor in the ground beneath their feet. The first warning sign that the Serpent's throat was already aware of their arrival. Ancient symbols etched into crumbling parchment cast long shadows across the weathered oak table as Falcon studied the expedition records with military precision. 3 failed expeditions in the past century alone, each ending with the same result: the death in the darkness of the Serpent's throat. The cave system had claimed 27 lives that he could verify, not counting the indigenous sacrifices documented in colonial records. Falcon's trained eyes moved methodically across the documents, processing information with the same efficiency that had kept his unit alive in Kandahar. "The Chamber of Echoes is more than legend," Elena insisted, spreading additional maps beside. "His research, my grandfather's grandfather spoke of it. A vast cavern of whispers where the ancients stored their most sacred treasures." Falcon nodded, maintaining tactical awareness of his surroundings, even in the safety of the village's small archives. Old habits from his Special Forces days never faded. "Every culture has myths. What interests me is the consistency in the accounts." He tapped 3 separate documents from different centuries, all describing the same distinctive marker, a serpentine symbol with 7 branches radiating outward. This symbol appears in 17th century Spanish records, 19th century British expedition notes, and your own local folklore. That's not a coincidence. That's confirmation. Dr. Raymond adjusted his glasses while examining carbon dating results from previous expeditions. The artifacts recovered from the outer chambers date back approximately 3,000 years. The civilization that created them predates Maya and Inca, yet shows sophisticated understanding of astronomical alignments and possibly early metallurgy. "Which is why there's academic interest," Falcon acknowledged, his mind already forming contingency routes through the cave system. But the Escobar expedition in 1977 had academic interest too. They still died 300 meters in. Dr. Way, their geological expert, indicated a structural analysis of the cave network. The Escobar team missed key geological indicators. These formations suggest intentional modification. The cave system wasn't just used by the ancients. It was engineered. Engineered as what? Lisa Chun, their documentary filmmaker, asked while checking her camera equipment with practiced precision. "That's the question," Falcon replied, reaching into his rucksack for a battered journal. "My mentor believed it was a test." The journal belonged to Professor Harlow, renowned explorer and Falcon's former professor, who disappeared in the Serpent's throat 5 years earlier. His final expedition had penetrated deeper than any previous attempt, but his final radio transmission had been cut short by what sounded like shifting stone and distant screams. Marcus theorized the Chamber of Echoes wasn't just a treasure vault, but a proving ground. Falcon continued, revealing pages of Reynolds' meticulous notes. The dangers weren't random. They were trials designed to test those seeking the chamber's secrets. Elena traced her finger along a crude map sketched in Reynolds' journal. My people's stories say only the worthy could enter the sacred chamber. The unworthy would feed the stone serpents. Primitive booby traps, Falcon translated for the team, his military mind automatically converting mythological language to tactical reality. Pressure plates, trip wires, deadfalls. Ancient versions of the same defenses I encountered in insurgent cave networks. Dr. Raymond looked skeptical. You're suggesting a 3,000-year-old civilization created mechanical traps that still function. Today, the temple complex at Angkor Wat has hydraulic systems still operational after 900 years. Dr. Wei countered. With stable geology and proper engineering, defensive mechanisms could remain functional for millennia. Falcon spread the expedition maps across the table, creating a comprehensive overview of known sections of the Serpent's throat. His trained eye identified 3 potential routes to the unexplored regions where Harlow had last transmitted. The legends describe 7 trials before reaching the Chamber of Echoes, he noted, marking the map with precise notations. Harlow's journal mentions encountering 3. That suggests we're missing a significant portion of the cave system. The team fell silent as Falcon traced potential entry points to hidden passages, his tactical assessment methodical and thorough. Outside the archive window, storm clouds gathered over the distant mountains housing the cave entrance. Local villagers hurried to secure their homes, casting nervous glances toward the expedition team in the archive. There's something else in the legends, Elena said quietly. The Chamber of Echoes responds only to the voice of the true seeker. All others who enter are consumed by shadows. Another trap mechanism, Falcon translated, probably sound activated. But as lightning illuminated the distant cave entrance, even the veteran explorer felt an involuntary chill. Military training had prepared him for human adversaries. The Serpent's throat had remained undefeated for centuries, a perfect predator with endless patience, waiting in the darkness for its next victim, the weight of 70 pounds of specialized exploration gear pressed against Falcon Mercer's back as he methodically checked each piece of equipment, his movements displaying the same precision that had kept him alive through 3 combat tours. Dawn painted the mouth of Serpent's throat in shades of amber and shadow, while the expedition team made their final preparations. The cave opening resembled a jagged wound in the mountainside, dark and foreboding against the rising sun. Final equipment check, Falcon announced, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to leading operations where mistakes meant casualties. Communications? Dual-band radio system with subterranean boosters, responded Dr. Abigail, the team's technology specialist. Primary and backup units tested at 98% efficiency. Range extenders are placed at 50-meter intervals once we descend. Falcon nodded, checking the military-grade tactical light secured to his helmet. 8 years in Special Forces had taught him to treat darkness as both cover and threat. Mapping? 3D laser scanning equipment operational, confirmed Dr. Wei. His fingers moved across specialized tablets with practiced efficiency. Backup systems and redundant power supplies ready. We're prepared for continuous mapping for 72 hours without resupply. Elena approached, her local knowledge making her invaluable despite her quiet demeanor. The villagers say the weather will hold for 3 days. After that, the seasonal rains could flood the lower passages. Her eyes darted toward the cave entrance. We should establish the first camp at the cathedral chamber before full dark. Situation understood, Falcon responded, mentally calculating descent times and rest periods, just as he'd once planned tactical insertions. Medical supplies, Dr. Smith. The expedition doctor patted his reinforced case. Trauma kit, antibiotics, antivenom, and emergency surgical equipment. Everything needed for field treatment of injuries consistent with cave exploration. Good. Safety protocols remain non-negotiable. Falcon addressed the team, scanning each face to ensure his message. Registered. We maintain a buddy system at all times. No solo exploration, regardless of experience level. Communication checks every 30 minutes. Any sign of structural instability, we retreat immediately and reassess. The team nodded, recognizing the voice of experience. Falcon had applied the same discipline to archaeological expeditions that he once used in combat zones. It had kept his teams alive in environments nearly as hostile as the one they were about to enter. First objective is establishing a base camp at the Cathedral Junction, he continued, gesturing to the 3D projection of known cave sections. Second objective, beginning systematic exploration of the unmapped eastern passages. Intelligence suggests previous expeditions missed potential access points to deeper chambers. Rodriguez, the youngest team member, checked his harness with nervous energy. What about the symbols Dr. Chen mentioned? Shouldn't we document those first? Affirmative, Falcon replied, appreciating the attention to detail. Documentation team will catalog entrance markings during our initial descent. Preliminary assessment suggests they're consistent with pre-Columbian warning glyphs, but with unusual variations. The descent began precisely at 0700 hours. Falcon took point, his muscle memory from countless tactical entries guiding his movements as he secured the initial rope system. The entrance narrowed quickly, forcing the team into single file formation. Helmet lights cut through darkness that seemed almost solid, revealing glistening limestone formations and treacherous footing. Movement through high-risk terrain, Falcon commanded, his voice echoing slightly. Maintain 3-point contact at all times. 2 hours into the descent, Elena froze suddenly, her hand raised in the universal sign for stop. Listen. The team fell silent, communication protocols requiring immediate compliance. Through the stillness came a sound, faint but distinct, like distant wind instruments playing discordant notes. Air current through limestone formations, Dr. Raymond suggested, though uncertainty tinged his voice. Cave systems this size often create natural acoustics. Perhaps, Falcon responded, but his instincts, the same ones that had detected ambushes and mountain passes half a world away, registered something else. Something intentional. At the first planned rest point, Abigail's light caught something on the wall that stopped the entire team. Previously unnoticed symbols, partially concealed by calcium deposits, formed patterns too precise to be natural. These weren't in any previous expedition records, she whispered. Already capturing high-resolution images, Falcon studied the markings with the focus he once reserved for analyzing enemy positions. They're deliberate concealments, designed to be overlooked by casual observation. As the team established their first night camp inside a chamber the size of a cathedral, strange sounds echoed through the darkness beyond their lights. The veteran explorer's hand unconsciously moved to where his sidearm would have been in another life, another operation. Security rotation, he announced, establishing watch schedules as naturally as he had with his combat team. 4-hour shifts. Nothing approaches without identification. Something about this cave system whispered of intention, of design, and Falcon Mercer had learned through bloody experience to recognize when he was being watched. The ancient limestone yielded reluctantly to Falcon's experienced touch, his tactical headlamp cutting through darkness that hadn't seen light in centuries. 20 meters below the surface, the cave's temperature dropped to a steady 52 degrees, the air heavy with mineral scents and something older, something undisturbed. His team moved in practice formation behind him, each member maintaining tactical spacing developed during their 3-day preparation drill. Watch that overhang, Falcon warned, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who'd navigated deadlier terrain under enemy fire. Elena, confirm these markings match your reference materials. Elena examined the peculiar symbols etched into the passage wall. Her fingers traced patterns with professional precision, comparing them to documented findings from her research. These aren't consistent with known regional pictographs, she reported, photographing the markings with methodical efficiency. The depth and tool patterns suggest they're significantly older than previously documented cave art in this region. The passage narrowed, forcing the 5-person team into single file. Falcon's military instincts registered subtle changes in air pressure, a tactical awareness that had saved his unit in mountain caves halfway across the world. Something was different about this section. The rock formations were too regular, too purposeful. Rodriguez, air composition check, Falcon instructed, maintaining his position while the team's environmental specialist deployed testing equipment. Oxygen levels normal, slight increase in carbon dioxide, but within expected parameters. Rodriguez confirmed, his movements economical in the confined space. However, there's an unusual trace element I can't identify with our portable equipment. Falcon noted the information without breaking stride. His tactical flashlight swept systematically across the chamber floor, catching an unusual reflection 30 meters ahead. The beam illuminated what appeared to be modern metal, incongruous against the ancient stone surroundings. "Hold position," he commanded, moving forward in a crouch developed through years of combat movement. His experienced eyes assessed the object from multiple angles before approach. "We've got equipment, modern, military-grade carabiner, heavily oxidized." Elena moved to his position, her headlamp joining his in illumination. "Serial marking matches expedition gear from the 1980s, she confirmed after a brief examination. "Likely from Professor Harlow's team." The name triggered memories of Falcon's mentor. Professor Harlow had transitioned from military service to archaeology, pioneering expedition techniques that borrowed from Special Forces protocols. His disappearance during his final cave expedition had brought Falcon to this very location. "Sir," called Abigail from 20 meters back, "my equipment's experiencing intermittent magnetic interference. Pattern suggests it's not natural." Falcon processed this information while completing his assessment of the abandoned gear. The positioning wasn't random. The equipment had been carefully arranged, not dropped in panic or accidentally abandoned. "Everyone, equipment check," he ordered, years of command experience evident in his tone. Each team member methodically verified their gear, reporting status with military precision. "Communications experiencing 15-second delays," reported Abigail. "GPS positioning showing multiple location errors. Backup systems?" Falcon inquired, already suspecting the answer. "Same issues, sir. Something's interfering with all electronic equipment." Falcon made a tactical decision based on years of operating in communication-denied environments. "Switch to analog backups and maintain visual contact. We're proceeding with caution." As the team advanced deeper into the unexplored section, Elena's light caught a glimpse of something unusual embedded in the wall. "Falcon, look at this." Falcon approached, his experienced eyes immediately recognizing what others might miss. A thin leather strap protruded from a narrow crevice, preserved by the cave's stable environment. With practiced care, he extracted what proved to be a field journal, its pages filled with Harlow's distinctive handwriting. "It's his," Falcon confirmed, a rare moment of emotion breaking through his professional demeanor. Last entry dated 3 days after they were reported missing. As he carefully secured the journal in a preservation pouch, a distant sound echoed through the passage. Not water, not wind, but something mechanical, something moving deep within the cave system. "Everyone freeze," Falcon commanded, his body instantly assuming a defensive posture developed through countless combat situations. The team complied immediately, their training evident in their response. The sound didn't repeat, but Falcon's instincts, the same ones that had detected ambushes in mountain passes halfway across the world, told him they had just triggered something ancient. Something designed to respond to intruders. The hunt for the Chamber of Echoes had officially become a tactical operation. The ancient stone beneath Ryan Cooper's boots shifted ever so slightly, a sound barely perceptible over the teen's labored breathing, but to Falcon's trained ears, it rang like an alarm bell. The veteran explorer's hand shot up, halting the expedition in an instant. 4 headlamps froze in position, their beams cutting through the mineral-laden mist that hung in the newly discovered chamber. "Nobody move," Falcon commanded, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had once guided Special Forces teams. "Through minefields. Cooper, ease your weight back. Slowly." The young geologist's face glistened with sweat as he carefully shifted his stance. "Something wrong with the formation?" Elena Vasquez moved her light across the chamber ceiling, revealing intricate patterns carved into the rock. "These markings, they're different from the outer passages, more precise. Deliberate." Falcon surveyed the cavernous room they'd spent. 3 hours reaching, his military instincts screaming warnings that his scientific mind couldn't yet articulate. The chamber opened before them like a cathedral, stalactites hanging like ancient daggers from 30 feet above. What had initially appeared to be natural rock formations now revealed subtle signs of human intervention. Too symmetrical, too. Purposeful. "This chamber's been modified," Dr. Raymond whispered, his archaeological expertise confirming Falcon's suspicions. "These aren't natural formations. They've been carved, reinforced." His light traced the unusual columns supporting a central platform. "Air currents are wrong too," Elena added, watching the strange movement of mist through the chamber. "There's a passage somewhere feeding air from below." Falcon's tactical training kicked in, eyes mapping escape routes, identifying choke points, assessing structural weaknesses. The chamber had only one visible entrance, the narrow passage they'd squeezed through after finding the abandoned equipment from the 1970s Kramer expedition. "Mercer," Cooper called, excitement overriding caution. "I'm picking up unusual mineral. Readings over here. Could be what we're looking for." The young geologist stepped toward a glistening vein of crystal embedded in the far wall, moving away from the group. "Cooper, maintain formation," Falcon ordered, but the geologist had already taken 3 steps toward his discovery. "It's just a few feet. I need a sample of this." Cooper's voice cut short as his boot connected with a circular stone that sank a half-inch into the floor with an ancient mechanical click. The sound reverberated through the chamber, followed by a low rumble that seemed to come from within the walls themselves. Falcon's reaction was instant. "Everyone down. Take cover," he shouted, diving toward Cooper as the grinding of stone against stone intensified. Professor Harris and Elena pressed themselves against the entrance passage wall as a section of the ceiling retracted with mechanical precision that defied its age. Falcon reached Cooper just as the first spear descended, a 6-foot limestone spike dropping with devastating speed from a hidden compartment. "Move!" Falcon shoved Cooper hard, sending him tumbling toward Elena. The veteran rolled in the opposite direction as the spear struck stone, shattering on impact and sending limestone shrapnel across the chamber floor. But it was only the first. 3 more spears dropped in rapid succession, the ancient trap functioning with terrible efficiency after centuries of waiting. The 3rd spear caught the strap of Cooper's equipment pack, pinning it to the ground inches from where he lay. "Nobody move," Falcon commanded again, his voice steady despite the chaos. The floor's pressure sensitive. The rumbling subsided, but a new sound emerged. The subtle shift of stone as previously invisible seams appeared in the chamber floor, section by section. The ground was beginning to reconfigure itself. "Harris, what are we looking at?" Falcon demanded, staying perfectly still in his position. The professor's archaeological expertise couldn't mask the tremor in his voice. "It's a puzzle chamber. The ancients built them to protect sacred spaces. Step on the wrong panel." Elena's headlamp caught movement on the chamber's far side. "We've got water seeping in from somewhere." Falcon's tactical assessment was grim. The chamber was turning into a death trap. Water rising, floor panels shifting, and potentially more sealing. Mechanisms waiting to be triggered. Cooper, ease back toward the entrance. 1 inch at a time, Falcon instructed, watching as the geologist began the painstaking process. I'm sorry, Cooper whispered, his scientific enthusiasm replaced by naked fear. I should have listened. Save. It, Falcon replied, his eyes never leaving the shifting floor patterns. Just move exactly as I tell you. The grinding sound intensified as Cooper shifted his weight onto what appeared to be a stable section of floor. Too late, Falcon spotted the subtle depression forming beneath the geologist's boot. Cooper, freeze! Falcon lunged forward, but the mechanism had already engaged. The floor beneath Cooper vanished, revealing a 10-foot shaft lined with limestone spikes. The geologist's scream echoed through the chamber as he plummeted, the sound cutting off with sickening abruptness. Ryan! Elena's cry bounced off the ancient walls as Falcon reached the edge of the pit, his headlamp revealing the grim scene below. The veteran explorer's face hardened, memories of lost teammates and distant mountains flashing behind his eyes. He'd seen this look before, the vacant stare, the unnatural angle of the neck, the absolute stillness that no medical intervention could reverse. He's gone, Falcon announced, his voice flat, professional, masking the rage and guilt boiling beneath. And we need to move. This entire chamber's waking up. Dr. Wei stared in horror. We should go back, report this to authorities. The passage we came through is already changing, Elena pointed out, her light revealing the entrance slowly closing, ancient stone grinding against stone. Falcon rose to his feet, military bearing taking over as he processed their diminishing options. Cooper's death wouldn't be the last if they made the wrong choice now. The chamber had claimed its first victim, the ancient trap functioning perfectly after centuries of patient waiting. We're not going back, Falcon stated, checking his equipment with mechanical efficiency. We're going forward. There's always another way out. The veteran explorer's gaze fixed on the far side of the chamber, where water continued to seep through previously invisible seams. This wasn't just a trap, it was a test. And somewhere beyond it lay the answers they'd come for, the chamber of echoes they had claimed his mentor years before. Rodriguez, Elena, gear check. We're moving in 2 minutes, Falcon ordered, already. Mapping their path across the deadly floor. And remember what Cooper just taught us. What's that? Elena asked, securing her equipment. Falcon's eyes reflected the cold calculation of a man who'd survived worse situations through discipline alone. In here, curiosity kills more than cats. Silent tensions rippled through the expedition team. As they huddled in the blue-white glow of emergency lamps, Cooper's death hanging heavy in the recycled cave air. James Falcon Mercer studied the faces of his remaining team members, reading their expressions with the same precision he once used to assess his Special Forces unit under duress. Elena Vasquez maintained professional composure, though her fingers worked methodically through her climbing gear, a self-soothing ritual Falcon recognized from soldiers post-engagement. Dr. Wei's academic objectivity had fractured, revealing the man beneath the credentials, while Rodriguez checked and rechecked communication equipment that hadn't functioned properly since they'd passed the second vertical shaft. We need to abort. Wei's voice cut through the tense silence. Ryan's death changes the risk assessment. Protocol dictates immediate extraction. His words carried the weight of 20 years in academic expeditions, but lacked the gravity of someone who'd made life or death decisions under fire. Falcon methodically disassembled and cleaned his specialized headlamp, military habits persisting through civilian life. That would be the prudent choice, he acknowledged, if we had that option. His tone remained measured, the same voice he'd used to brief teams before high-risk operations. But our primary extraction route is compromised. Elena's voice maintained. Professional detachment as she pulled up the digital mapping display. The passage network has shifted. That tremor wasn't natural. Her fingers traced the limestone features with practiced precision. These formations don't collapse this way without intervention. Falcon processed this information with tactical analysis. Someone designed this system. These aren't natural formations. They're engineered defensive positions. He recognized the patterns from ancient fortifications he'd studied during military training on historical warfare tactics. Professor Harlow would have seen it, he muttered, thinking of his mentor whose expedition disappeared in these caves 3 years earlier. The dog tags around Falcon's neck, not his, but his mentor's, clinked softly against his equipment. As he leaned forward, Abigail slammed her satellite communicator down. Comms are still dead. We have 2 options. Wait for extraction that might never come, or press forward. The team fell silent as a distant rumble vibrated through the cave system. Dust particles danced in the beam of their lights. That's the 3rd microtremor in 20 minutes, Elena observed, checking sensitive monitoring equipment. They're increasing in frequency and intensity. This section is becoming unstable. Falcon moved to the passage they'd designated as their evacuation route, the one that led back toward the surface. His tactical flashlight illuminated what he already suspected. The ceiling had collapsed, boulders and debris creating an impenetrable barrier. Extraction route compromised, he reported with military precision. Attempting to clear it would trigger further collapse based on these stress fractures. He indicated the web-like patterns in the remaining rock face. A detail only. Someone with demolition experience would recognize. Dr. Wei's academic composure finally broke. So we're trapped? Ryan died for nothing? His voice echoed against the ancient walls. Not trapped, Falcon corrected, moving to the opposite chamber where they'd discovered the wall carvings earlier. Redirected. His light played across the etched stone, revealing markings they'd initially dismissed as decorative. With Ryan Cooper's death sharpening his focus, Falcon now recognized what they actually were, a map. Elena, your father translated those Sumerian boundary glyphs, correct? Falcon asked, mission focus returning to his voice. She nodded, moving closer to the wall. They're not just warnings. They're directions. Her fingers traced specific symbols. This indicates a chamber, large chamber ... with multiple exits. Falcon checked his equipment with methodical precision. The same pre-mission ritual he'd performed countless times in combat zones. These aren't random cave passages. This is a facility. Designed, engineered, and defended. The team watched as he repacked his tactical gear, his decision evident in his movements. Harlow found something in here worth dying for, Falcon stated, securing his equipment with practiced efficiency. Now Cooper has paid the same price. The way out isn't back, it's through. His gaze swept across the team, assessing their readiness. With the same calculation he once used before leading men into combat. Whatever's in that chamber, he said, checking the oxygen reserves in their emergency systems. It's our only path to survival now. Death had already claimed one team member. But the ancient architects of Serpent's throat weren't finished with them yet. James Falcon Mercer crouched at the entrance to the narrow passageway, his headlamp illuminating what appeared to be primitive pressure plates embedded in the stone floor. 20 years in special forces had taught him to recognize a kill zone. When he saw one, "Everyone hold position," Falcon commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I've got eyes on multiple trigger mechanisms. These aren't natural formations." Elena knelt beside him, her archaeological expertise complementing his tactical assessment. "These match the warning glyphs we found in the map chamber. The inscriptions spoke of the path of blades that guards the sacred space." Falcon nodded, studying the terrain with the same methodical precision he'd used clearing ID-laden buildings in Fallujah. "Rodriguez, pass me the carbon fiber probe." Everyone else maintained distance. We're looking at an engineered defense system, likely 3,000 years old, but still operational. The remaining team members watched as Falcon extended the lightweight probe across the first pressure plate. Nothing happened. Then he applied gradual pressure. A whisper of movement above caused him to freeze instantly. "Ceiling-mounted blade trap," he reported, voice steady. "Triggered at approximately 2 kilograms of pressure." These ancients understood tactical defense. Dr. Raymond made notes in his waterproof journal. Remarkable. This level of mechanical engineering shouldn't have existed in this region during that period. "History books don't matter much when you're dead," Falcon replied, already mapping a path through the trigger points. The team that built this understood one thing perfectly: how to channel their targets into a predetermined kill zone. 3 meters into the corridor, Falcon discovered the skeletal remains of a previous explorer, skull crushed by a stone counterweight that still rested on the bleached bones. The deceased's backpack contained equipment from the 1970s, confirming locals. Stories of multiple failed expeditions. "That's Matheson's team," Alina whispered, recognizing the vintage gear. "They disappeared in '76. Falcon checked the skeleton's position carefully. He triggered a secondary mechanism. "Look how the floor stones are slightly misaligned here. Step on the wrong one, and the ceiling drops." Using techniques developed for navigating minefields, Falcon guided the team meter by meter through the deadly corridor. His military experience translated perfectly to this ancient battlefield. The principles of defensive fortification hadn't changed in 3 millennia. "Hold," he commanded sharply as Rodriguez nearly stepped on an innocent-looking stone. "See how that rock has a slightly different mineral composition. That's your trigger." Alina studied the wall inscriptions as they progressed. These symbols keep referencing the warrior's path, a safe route known only to the temple guardians. Falcon's tactical mind processed this information. They're telling us something. Military installations always have a secure access route for authorized personnel. His fingers traced weathered grooves in the wall. These marks aren't decorative, they're navigation aids. Following the nearly invisible path markers, Falcon led the team through 3 more deadly chambers. A pendulum blade trap that would have decapitated anyone taking the obvious route. A floor that dropped away into a spiked pit when triggered. A hallway where poison darts still waited in their ancient tubes, ready to fire. "Whoever built this place," Dr. Wei observed, "they were serious about keeping people out." "Or keeping something in," Falcon replied, noting how the defenses became more sophisticated the deeper they progressed. After 6 hours of methodical advancement, they reached a vertical shaft with crude handholds carved into the stone. At the bottom, barely visible in their lights, lay more human remains. "That's Hargrove's expedition from the 90s, Alina confirmed, recognizing a distinctive boot design. Falcon studied the shaft carefully. They made it this far, then got careless. The handholds on the left side are booby-trapped. He pointed to almost imperceptible differences in the stone cutting. Military thinking. Make the enemy believe they found the safe route, then eliminate them when they commit. Wei looked troubled. These defenses, they're not primitive. They're tactical, strategically designed. Someone with combat experience designed this system, Falcon agreed. Someone who understood human psychology and battlefield tactics. As they prepared to descend using only the safe handholds, Alina translated another warning glyph. Beyond lies the threshold of echoes, where only the worthy may pass. Falcon checked his equipment one final time. "Stay alert, people. The ancients have already shown they know how to kill unwelcome visitors. And I've got a feeling we haven't seen their best defenses yet." Darkness gave way to revelation as Falcon's tactical light cut through centuries of untouched air. The beam revealed what no living eye had witnessed in over a millennium: an ornate stone archway, its surface covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with ancient warning. Behind him, the remaining expedition members held their collective breath, the narrow passage amplifying even the smallest sounds of their equipment shifting against rock-worn fatigues. "Movement discipline," Falcon whispered, the command instantly recognized by his team. Years of Special Forces training had conditioned him to approach unknown territory with methodical precision. Standard tactical spacing. Elena on point 4. Symbol identification, Raymond covering rear security. The passage widened unexpectedly, opening into a small antechamber that bore the unmistakable signs of human craftsmanship. Unlike the natural formations they'd navigated for days, these walls displayed deliberate construction, precision cut, stone fitted with engineering skill that defied the primitive tools of its era. "Structural assessment," Falcon ordered, scanning the ceiling with practiced efficiency. His helmet-mounted camera recorded everything, the tactical habit of documentation continuing despite their scientific mission. "Looking for trigger mechanisms, pressure plates, trip lines." Elena moved forward, her eyes cataloging details Falcon's military perspective might miss. "These markings," she traced the air inches from the stone, never touching the surface. "They're consistent with Sumerian protective wards, but with elements I've never seen documented." "Rodriguez, perimeter check," Falcon directed, maintaining operational awareness even as his eyes locked on the massive stone door dominating the chamber's far wall. Years of clearing insurgent cave networks in Afghanistan had taught him to never fixate on a single objective. The tunnels of Kandahar had claimed too many who'd failed to maintain situational awareness. "This isn't just sealed," Dr. Wei observed, adjusting his glasses as he studied the elaborate locking mechanism. "It's a sequential puzzle. Mathematical progression based on astronomical alignments." Falcon approached the door, his tactical light illuminating a series of concentric circles embedded with metal pins of varying lengths. The design triggered recognition, not from archaeological briefings, but from combat experience. "It's a tumbler system," he muttered, mind flashing back to specialized training on ancient fortress designs. "Similar to what we studied in historical warfare tactics. The Persians used comparable mechanisms to protect their treasuries." With careful precision, Falcon traced the pattern without touching the mechanism. Decades of explosive ordnance training, keeping his hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. The sequence matters. "This isn't just about alignment, it's about timing." "Like a combination lock?" Rodriguez asked, maintaining his position while scanning the chamber entrance. "More sophisticated," Falcon replied, studying how shadows cast by their lights created particular patterns across the door's surface. "It's designed to respond to specific light positions." A solar calendar combined with a mechanical lock. Elena's eyes widened with understanding. The Chamber of Echoes was said to open only when the stars aligned. We thought it was metaphorical. Falcon calculated angles, measuring the room's dimensions against the lock's configuration. His mind processed the problem as he'd once assessed insurgent compounds, identifying patterns, analyzing weaknesses, planning the approach. "Position lights at these coordinates," he directed, marking 3 specific points around the chamber. The team moved with practiced coordination, positioning their high-powered lights exactly as instructed. As the beams converged on the doors, central mechanism, a low rumbling vibrated through the stone floor. Dust dislodged from ancient crevices as metal pins within the door began to rotate independently. "Hold position," Falcon commanded, his voice steady as the mechanism's movement accelerated. The pins aligned in sequence, each connection triggering the next in a cascade of ancient engineering. The rumbling intensified until, with a final metallic click that echoed like artillery in the confined space, the massive door began to slide sideways into a hidden recess. Stale air rushed past them, carrying the undisturbed scent of centuries. As the door completed its movement, their lights revealed a vast chamber beyond, its dimensions defying the natural constraints of the cave system they'd navigated. Columns rose to support a ceiling adorned with astronomical patterns rendered in precious metals that still gleamed after centuries in darkness. "My God," Elena whispered, her professional composure momentarily broken by wonder. Falcon's tactical light swept the chamber methodically, identifying key features before focusing on what appeared to be a central altar. His expression remained controlled, but his pulse quickened as he identified something reflecting their lights from the altar's surface. "The Chamber of Echoes," he confirmed, stepping forward with measured caution. "Secure the entrance. We've found it." The vast chamber of echoes stretched before them, the ceiling lost in darkness as Falcon's tactical light struggled to reach its heights. Ancient stalactites hung like stone daggers above intricate floor mosaics, depicting cosmic events and forgotten deities. For 20 years, James Falcon Mercer had searched for this place, following the ghost of his mentor's final expedition. "Incredible," Elena whispered, her voice carrying strange harmonics through the chamber. "It's at least 3 times larger than any recorded pre-Columbian ceremonial space." Her flashlight beam danced across wall carvings, showing astronomical alignments and ritual processions. Falcon moved with military precision, each step carefully placed as he scanned for pressure plates or trigger mechanisms. "Rodriguez, maintain position at the entrance. Way, document everything. Nobody touches anything without clearance." His team responded with practiced efficiency, the 4 remaining members spreading out in their assigned search pattern. The central altar rose from the chamber floor like a stone island, surrounded by a mosaic river of blue and green tiles. Falcon's tactical light revealed something his heart had feared, but his mind had expected. A human skeleton dressed in the tattered remains of expedition gear, at least 2 decades old. "Professor Harlow," he breathed, recognizing the distinctive silver pocket watch still clutched in bony fingers. The man who'd taught him archaeology after his military discharge, who'd disappeared chasing this very chamber 20 years ago. "You found it after all." Elena approached cautiously, documenting the scene. The position suggests he was conducting some kind of measurement or observation of the altar when he died. No signs of violence or struggle. Dr. Wei called from across the chamber, voice echoing strangely. "Falcon, you need to see this. Some kind of mechanical construction behind the north wall." The team converged on Wei's position, where a section of seemingly solid stone had been partially displaced, revealing a complex system of counterweights and bronze gears still gleaming after centuries. "It's still active," Falcon muttered, military instincts immediately assessing the threat. "This whole chamber is mechanized." His fingers traced delicate engravings beside the exposed mechanism, recognizing the pattern from his special forces training in ancient defensive systems. "This isn't just ceremonial, it's a survival mechanism." Rodriguez's voice cracked through the radio from his position at the entrance. "Movement in the corridor. The stone door is shifting." Falcon's tactical assessment was immediate. "Everyone, document what you can. Priority artifacts only. We've triggered something just by being here." His years in combat zones had taught him to recognize when a position was compromised. The slight tremor beneath his boots confirmed his fears. Elena worked feverishly, capturing images of the central altar. "These inscriptions, they're describing some kind of containment protocol. This chamber wasn't built to protect treasure from thieves. It was designed to contain something." The floor vibration intensified as Raymond retrieved core samples from crystal formations. Ancient gears ground somewhere deep within the walls, a sound like massive stone teeth slowly meshing together. Rodriguez reported the entrance continuing. Too narrow, now barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Falcon approached Harlow's remains, gently removing the silver watch. "He figured it out too late," he said, examining scribbled notes in a weathered journal beside the skeleton. The chamber defense mechanism operates on a counterweight system. When triggered, it seals completely unless weight is maintained on the central platform. The implication struck the team into silence, broken only by the grinding mechanical sounds growing louder on them. Elena's eyes met Falcon's, recognizing the calculation in his expression. "Get everything to the entrance," Falcon ordered, his voice carrying the same calm authority that had guided his military unit through dozens of critical situations. "Priority samples and documentation only." As the team gathered their findings, Falcon moved to the central altar, carefully studying the mechanism. His tactical light revealed what Harlow had discovered too late: the pressure plate disguised within the altar's design. The chamber had been built as both temple and trap. 3 minutes until full closure, Rodriguez reported from the entrance. Voice tight with urgency. Falcon made his decision with the same clarity that had defined his military career. "Elena, take the team and Harlow's journal. Get through that." "Entrance now." Elena froze, understanding dawning. "Falcon, no. There has to be another way." "Negative," he replied, military terminology returning under pressure. "The mechanism requires constant pressure to allow exit. Someone has to stay." He positioned himself on the central platform, feeling ancient machinery respond to his weight. Richards died trying to find a way out. "I won't make that mistake." "We're not leaving you," Wei protested as the grinding grew louder. "That's an order," Falcon replied, the command in his voice bringing no argument. "This discovery changes everything we know about pre-Columbian civilization. Those samples contain technological elements that shouldn't exist in this era." The team hesitated until Elena finally nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We'll come back for you. Find another way." Falcon smiled grimly. "I'll keep looking." He watched as they squeezed through the narrowing entrance, Rodriguez the last to go, offering a respectful military salute before disappearing. Alone in the vast chamber, Falcon turned to examine the altar more closely. The mechanism that had claimed his mentor now held him captive as well. But unlike Harlow, he wouldn't die wondering. 20 years in special forces had taught him that every trap had a design flaw. If you were willing to pay the price to find it, the entrance sealed with a final grinding shudder, leaving Falcon Mercer alone with the ancient machinery and the bones of his mentor. The chamber's secrets and its deadly trap now his to unravel in whatever time remained. Silence descended over the chamber of echoes as Falcon made his decision, the ancient air heavy with dust and centuries of undisturbed history. The central altar mechanism had triggered, massive stone gears grinding to life after hundreds of years of stillness. The chamber's ultimate defense system was now active, and James Falcon Mercer recognized the design immediately. A dead man's switch that would collapse the entire network if everyone attempted to leave. "Elena, get them out through the eastern passage. You've got 8 minutes before the secondary mechanisms engage." Falcon's voice carried the unmistakable command tone from his Special Forces days. No panic, just tactical assessment and decisive action. "We're not leaving you," Elena protested, her headlamp illuminating the determination on her face. "This isn't a discussion, it's an extraction order." Falcon checked his equipment with practiced efficiency. Someone needs to maintain pressure on the central column or the whole system collapses. The archaeological evidence you're carrying changes everything we know about pre-Columbian civilization. That matters to more than one explorer. The remaining team members exchanged glances, their expressions betraying the grim calculation taking place. Professional explorers understood acceptable risk. This wasn't it. "Sir, I can stay instead," Rodriguez offered, the former Army Ranger's training evident in his stance. "Negative. You don't read ancient Mayan," Falcon replied, already moving toward the central altar. "I need these final minutes to document what's here. Now move out." Through his tactical headlamp, Falcon studied the intricate carvings surrounding the altar where his mentor's remains had been discovered. The old man had triggered the same trap years ago, making the same choice Falcon now faced. The evidence was clear in how the skeleton was positioned, one hand still resting on the pressure plate. 5 minutes, Falcon called out, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. The team reluctantly began their withdrawal, each member pausing briefly for a final acknowledgement. Professional courtesy between those who venture into the unknown. As their lights disappeared down the eastern passage, Falcon activated his remaining camera equipment, methodically documenting the chamber's secrets. The altar housed something more significant than treasure. It contained star charts and navigation techniques that predated known civilization records by thousands of years. Final log entry, he spoke into his recorder. The chamber appears to be an ancient astronomical observatory. The civilization that built this place understood celestial navigation at a level we previously thought impossible for their era. The stone gears continued their relentless movement, secondary mechanisms engaging throughout the chamber. Falcon's military training helped him identify each new sound, mapping the chamber's defense system in his mind. Pressure plates, counterweights, flood channels from the underground river. Whoever designed this place understood tactical defense with remarkable sophistication. 3 minutes now. Through his comm unit, Falcon could hear the team navigating the eastern passage. They would make it. The archaeological evidence would survive. His sacrifice would have meaning. Falcon turned his attention to the central column, where intricate mechanisms connected to the ceiling far above. His mentor's final notes were clenched in the skeletal hand, preserved in the chamber's dry air. As he carefully retrieved them, Falcon noticed additional markings previously hidden beneath the body. "Wait, there's something else here," he spoke into his recorder. "The central column contains what appears to be a star map, but these aren't constellations we recognize. If I'm reading this correctly, these are coordinates too." The realization hit him. These aren't decorative elements. They're navigational charts to other sites. The chamber suddenly trembled, ancient dust falling from the ceiling. Secondary collapse beginning. Outside the chamber, water sounds grew louder as river channels diverted toward the escape routes. Falcon worked methodically, photographing every inch of the star map. His final transmission would have to be brief but complete. With practiced efficiency, he uploaded the images to the satellite transmitter he'd given Elena. The signal was weak this deep, but it would buffer and send once they reached the surface. Final message: the chamber isn't just an observatory. It's a map room to something much larger, something worldwide. Falcon's professional demeanor remained steady even as stone blocks began falling around him. "Tell the university this isn't just one site, it's a network." The chamber's rumbling intensified. Ancient mechanisms, still functioning after centuries, executed their final purpose. The dead man's switch required constant pressure. Falcon had already accepted what that meant. As the first major collapse began, Falcon Mercer stood at attention beside his mentor's remains, two guardians of ancient knowledge making the same choice centuries apart. The veteran explorer's final thoughts weren't of fear, but of mission. Completion. The team would escape. The knowledge would survive. Some mysteries were worth the ultimate sacrifice. The Chamber of Echoes claimed its final guardian as it had always been designed to do.